Ah, there you are. Come, take a seat. I'm sure you have lots of questions, and I shall do my best to fill you in. For one reason or another, your sire, that is the vampire that turned you, so to speak, is unable to give you this lesson, which is rather unfortunate for me, because that's left me having to babysit you, so to speak. But I have been appointed to do this task, and I shall fulfill my obligations. You see, today is a lesson of sorts. You are a child again, and I shall be your educator in this world of darkness. True, you could walk out now, I'm not forcing you to be here, but without my advice, the advice of an elder, you are as good as dead in these dark nights, so I would take that seat if I were you. Good. Now, there's a lot of places I'd like to start, but I'm going to do so with the vocabulary. See, we are all new creatures now, creatures of the night. Most know us as vampires, but we are kindred. That is our word for one another, and you shall do well to remember our words, for misspeaking in front of the wrong elder might result in you getting your head removed, and that's if you're lucky. So whenever I use these words, I'm going to tell you the layman's terms after, but please remember them and make sure you use them when in the correct circles. Right, now with that out the way, I'd like to start with what we actually are. You are a kindred now, an apex predator, a monster that feeds on the vitae of others. Vitae is our word for blood. But due to our interventions, the common populace has many misconceptions about us. That is by design, we own the media, so I shall tell you all of the true details about us, as well as the classic misinterpretations and beliefs about us. We are dead. We no longer breathe, and our hearts do not beat unless we want them to. We are walking corpses that require a great deal of effort and manual focus to work again like we previously did. You can no longer eat food or drink. You might be able to hold it down for a while, maybe to keep up appearances, but it is coming right back out. But most of us do not miss it, for the act of feeding is so much more. It is the best meal you've ever experienced, combined with the most ultimate drug high, with none of the downs, as well as a pure night of wild sexual pleasure, and more. It is the type of thing you cannot truly describe accurately, you can only experience, and if you have yet to feed, it is something you've got to look forward to. We are stronger, faster, tougher, more intelligent, and immortal. Though all of these could vary depending on what type of kindred you are and your clan. A clan, that is a sort of vampire bloodline, responsible for your various vampiric powers. If your sire, for example, could throw a car over their head, you should be able to do the same thing, with great time and practice. The powers of the blood are immense, and you do need to practice them. It's not something you just awaken. I, for one, am quite talented in controlling minds of those weaker-willed than me, which is everyone. I can make people forget they ever met me, or command someone to do a handstand, even if they're not able to do so. It's quite a funny reaction. Oh, and as you'd expect, we create another of our kind by turning immortal, but it is not as simple as draining a kine. Kine is our word for mortal, and it's kindred and kine, that sort of thing. While that part is true, you do need to drain a mortal. There is another step to it. You must feed them some of your own vitae at the moment just after. It is more of an art than a science. No two of us will do it exactly alike, and you will instantly and instinctually just know how to do this. This act is known as the embrace, but heed me now. You are never to commit such an act without permission. It is one of the main tenets of the Masquerade. I'll go into more detail on what that is later. Just don't do it for the foreseeable future. Garlic has absolutely no effect on us, neither does silver or running water, but holy symbols can be a different deal entirely. For the most part, you will be safe all of the time within their presence. See, they only really have any true power over us if they are being held by a true believer, which is 1 in a million, and even then they don't really go out and hunt us, so it's not really something you need to worry about. Oh, and I should note before you ask an obvious religion question, yes, every single religion has this power if they are a true believer, which makes me obviously believe that they're all ridiculous, but my political points aside. And how strong all of our powers and effects will be is entirely determined on our generation, essentially how far detached we are from the first vampires. Whoever these kindred are is actually under some debate. It would be important for me to note some of the more obvious beliefs. Most think it is Cain, the one from the Bible who killed his brother, the first ever murder. Or perhaps Lilith, the first ever woman before Eve, 2 figures from Christian mythology. But I also hear other tales. One of them, for example, comes from the North Faith, who think the first kindred was a traitor who tried to kill Odin, and in response he had his own organs ripped out and runes carved upon his rib cage before being thrown back into our world. All of these are quite ridiculous if you ask me, but they are quite interesting tales that I recommend you research. Personally, I think there was more than just one of the first generation. There are way too many cultures around the world that have wildly different origin tales. But regardless, the first and the second generations were very little in number, to the point where, well, you could count them on one hand. The third generation, however, is where it gets more interesting. See, this is where the idea of clans actually comes from. See, with the blood being weakened lower down the generations, ones of the third started to specialize in their favorite powers, making sure that these 2 or 3 abilities were as powerful as their sires. This resulted in their childer, their vampire prodigies of the 4th generation, only being able to use their powers from then on out, which is what resulted in us all being a little bit different. Of course, the obvious downside is that our generations are starting to get higher and higher in number, and our blood is being diluted, so to speak. It has been quite a long time, and we are all the way down to the 15th of our generations. And those of the 15th are hardly even considered real members of our kind. Thin bloods, we call them, and they are little more than a step above mortals. They have some unique effects given by their thinner blood, the ability to do forms of alchemy that I find intriguing, and some can even do things like eat food and walk out in sunlight, those really both. But I would hardly say it is worth it. They are hunted and hated by practically everyone, and some elders are foolish enough to think that their appearance in the world means that this is the end of days, ridiculously enough. But I should get onto some of our powers. And I should talk about how our vitae is very powerful. We have effects over this world and each other. We can perform an act known as a blood bond. This is when one of our own kind drinks straight from the skin of another kindred, usually the wrists, for example. This gives you power over them. When this is done, it forms a connection between the two. If done enough, they will become a slave to you. They will be unable to decline a command and will be little more than a puppet under your control, and will also like it. They'll be addicted to it. They'll want to do it again, which is fortunate because the effect needs to be maintained, as it will wear off after a few months, so to speak. And in case you're wondering, the act of siring, the act of embracing, turning a mortal into a kindred, part way starts this process. But that's a little more permanent. If you ever meet your sire, you will have a innate desire to follow their wills, even if you despise them. We can even do this to kine, to mortals, and make them become something in between the two of us. Ghouls, we call them. They gain a fraction of our powers and stop aging, so long as they keep drinking the vitae. They will even become addicted to it, and willing to do almost anything to get more of it. They will not be a slave to you if you get them to stop drinking from the source. Say you cut your own wrist, let it pour out into a bowl, and they drink from said bowl. That wouldn't bond them, but keep them as a ghoul. Oh, but keep in mind, if they stop drinking it, they will start to age all of the years they have skipped in an instant. It's not really a problem if they've only been a ghoul for, say, 3 months, but when they reach a lifespan of over 100 years, well, you can start to see how that's a bit more of a problem. I've always found it a fascinating note, that how we do these acts changes the very power over them. If they drink directly from the source, they become a slave. But if it's from a bag of blood, or dripping off your fingertips, they are not bonded at all, and yet get to retain all of their benefits without being slaves. It goes to show that everything's more of an art than a science. It is truly magic at the end of the day, or rather night, and we are beings of magic. Do not try to scientifically analyze anything we do. It doesn't make sense. Right, I think that's enough about what our nature truly is. I think you probably have the gist of what we are by now, and I think it is time to talk about our society of the night, the very basics at least, a start. Now I shall tell you what the Masquerade is. It is the most important part of our society, the rules that you must follow, and if you find someone who does not, run. Now then, I will start with detailing the manner and order of our Camarilla society. That is the largest faction of our kind. I am a member of said faction, and you would be wise shall you stay as one, young fledgling. For a start, we stay within cities, maybe a town if it is large enough, but never the countryside. That is the domain of another type of beast entirely, one you should avoid altogether. You're not even powerful enough to know about said beasts. Just know that if you go there, you will die. Simple as. So, each city is led by a prince, the overlord of said domain. All pay the prince his or her dues, and with as much respect as possible. They are your master now. Treat them as such. They own the city, and by extension, everything within it, and every one that dwells there. True, there are other factions who claim to not be members of our society, but so long as they follow the rules, we let them think they are truly independent, the fools and none the wiser. But those who refuse to follow our rules are eliminated. Simple as that. To enforce the prince's rules, they elect a sheriff, usually someone tougher than can be imagined, and horrid to boot. They need to be intimidating, as to scare the things that go bump in the night. The sheriff might elect henchmen to help them in doing this task. They are known as scourges. They don't tend to have many, as they don't really want to make more competition down the lines. There are of course some other positions, things that are known as harpies. They're a little more complex, I'll get into them another day. There are of course other power players. The eldest of each clan has a leader, one that is in charge of all clan matters and speaks to the prince directly, known as the Primogen. I'm sure you are set to meet your clan Primogen, if you have yet to do so already, as they tend to oversee the rites of creation, as well as the prince. And I assure you, if you don't know about them, they know about you, as they have as many lackeys as the prince, if not more. Each city and domain has their own rules, but there are 6 that all must follow. These are kindred gospel, and you must learn them. I cannot stress this enough. You must learn these rules, to the point where you can quote them. They are the 6 traditions, and I shall quote them now. They are as follows. The first tradition is the Masquerade. Thou shalt not reveal thy true nature to those not of the blood. Doing such shall renounce thy claims of blood. The second tradition is the domain. Thy domain is thine own concern. All others owe thee respect while in it. None may challenge thy word while in thy domain. The third tradition is the progeny. Thou shalt only sire another with the permission of thine elder. If thou createst another without thine elder's leave, both thou and thy progeny shall be slain. The fourth tradition, the accounting. Those thou create are thine own children. Until thy progeny shall be released, thou shalt command them in all things. Their sins are thine to endure. The fifth tradition, hospitality. Honour one another's domain. When thou comest to a foreign city, thou shalt present thyself to one of the ruleth. There, without the word of acceptance, thou art nothing. The sixth tradition, destruction. Thou art forbidden to destroy another of thy kind. The right of destruction belongeth only to thine elder. Only the eldest among thee shall call the blood hunt. End quote. You may mock me for memorizing it verbatim, but some view it as a crime to not do so. Remember that. If you are going to not take a lot of it seriously, at least make sure that you remember what they are. I do not wish to see a new fledgling die so soon. Follow these traditions, follow these rules, and you will survive. They are the thing that keeps us in line, stops us from becoming true monsters. You will come to realize, if you haven't already, that you are more of a slave than you know. Not to the prince, but to the still, cold blood within your veins. Perhaps you have already heard it. The beast within your mind that wants you to feed, that wants you to kill and rip apart those that have wronged you in life. But do not heed it. Fight this beast in whatever way you can. You are a monster, yes, but do not act like one, lest it truly take control. Retain your humanity for as long as you can, whatever that requires of you. Bond with mortals, take up a lover, keep your oaths, whatever it takes to remind you that you have some humanity left. For if you let the beast take over too much, you will become little more than a feral monster that will attack and eat everything it sees. Whites, we call them, and we kill them on sight. This is one of the main reasons we have these rules, to stop us going too far. Even if the Owlers would never admit it, we are still human deep down. We cannot allow ourselves to let go of that. Unlike mortals, we can, easily, and so we must fight it. How we choose to feed will affect this too. It's something we class things by. There are all sorts of ways people feed. Some people do so in the act of seducing mortals, shall I say. Some gaslight and manipulate people into forgetting it ever happened. Some just attack those in the streets and drink them dry. Some even buy bags of blood from hospitals. It's not too hard, we own all of the hospitals. Oh, and one nice tip if you actually plan to feed, if you lick the wound after feeding from it, it heals up and closes. This is because all liquids in our bodies have been replaced with our blood, and our blood has healing properties, even to others. Oh, and yes, everything we do, though we no longer have requirements, the fluids have in fact been replaced with blood. Every single liquid in our body is blood. It's quite weird, yes, everything, including that thing you're thinking of now, yes, it's blood. There is one last thing I shall get into detail on, and I really wish I didn't have to. It is a horrid thing that I don't want to tell you about, but deep down, the worst part of you already knows of it. There is still one sin us unholy beings are able of committing. The Camarilla Society only allows us to do so on very specific occasions, that is, during a blood hunt. This is when a prince or primogen has called for the death of another kindred. The sin is known as the act of diablerie. This is when we drain every last drop of another kindred and consume them whole, their body aging all the years they have skipped. That happens normally, it's just grosser when it's happening in your mouth. In committing such an act, you consume their very soul and gain a fraction of their power. This is the only way you can actually lower your generation. And you can even learn some of the disciplines that you couldn't previously have access to. Disciplines is what we call the powers of the blood, the abilities to throw cards over your shoulders. It's very clan specific, and if they are of a different clan, you may learn their powers. But they will live on within you. They will appear before you like a spectre and demand all sorts from you mentally. It might even take up to 100 years before they fade fully and get consumed into your own soul. And if they are stronger than you, by a few multitudes, they might even take control of your body, and leave you the one trapped, a soulless husk slowly being consumed. But you must never commit said act. Not only is it a gamble that you'd even make it through it, but it scars you permanently. It takes a part of your humanity and destroys it utterly, something that's very hard to heal. The act alone will get you shunned away from most of Upper Camarilla society. Albeit you might not be a fan of them, you do need them for some things. And even if you do it during a time you're allowed, most will look down on you. And if you commit said act without permission, you yourself will be blood hunted. So if you have to kill one of our kindred and must feed, don't drain them fully. Merely take what you need and kill them normally. There is still so much more I wish to tell you of. The clans, the factions, the specific disciplines. But unfortunately, I am needed elsewhere. I am quite the busy kindred, as it were. Feel free to use some of my resources in the meantime. If you have to lay low or don't have a place for yourself, you're not going to want for money, at least not for the foreseeable future. But do keep your head down. I am technically responsible for you. We'll have another meeting soon, I'm sure, when my schedule allows. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next you meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.